Falchiony.
Greetings, sword friends! All good things must come to an end, and it is time for me to say goodbye to one of my favorite swords. So, we're going to talk about this sword in a second, but first I want to talk about Mr. Eric Estlund and Winter Cutlery. So, Eric and I had been nerding out and discussing lots of swords online, and he and I had been discussing weapons dynamics, and I've been helping him creating graphs for various swords that he had been creating as a blacksmith. In helping him to create some of these dynamic graphs, we created enough of these that we were able to create a family of Eric Estlund swords in the style of those which were put into the catalog for the sword form and thought. And so we made a two-page group of Eric's swords, and Eric was able to print these out in a size that matches those that are found in the book, and he was kind enough to send me a print so that it slots right in with my own book right here. So I wanted to say thank you to Eric for making sure that I had my own copy of the addendum to the Sword Form and Thought, Peter Johnson's collections of the swords that were measured in Sillingen. That's really special. So in being able to help Eric with some of his swords measurements, etc., we had discussed possibly sending over some of his work that I'd be able to look up close and personal and review, and we've been doing that on the channel. And when I was looking at all the swords he was potentially able to send, I had immediately focused in on one sword in particular, and that is the sword we're about to talk about. But he has sent other swords as well. We had previously looked at the Type 18 longsword, as well as this beautiful messer and knife set, which we can see on the previous videos on the channel. So with those other swords having already been reviewed, we now come to the last sword, and I'm out of time to give it as long as I'd love to, but we'll make the most of it here. So what is this? This is, of course, a falchion. He calls it a Northern Italian Falchion, and this is a bit of a speculative design on Eric's part. So he has components that he's borrowed from existing sword designs. Now, if you've heard me discuss falchions on any of my previous videos, perhaps go and take a look at the discussion I had with James Elmsley on the channel. You'll know that we have very few surviving medieval falchions from which to draw actual designs on. So the blade that he has here is heavily based on the Castillon Horde falchion. We have one falchion blade from the Castillon group of swords, which is dated to around 1450 or so. So a French find. We're not sure the origin of where the swords came from, but it was found in the River Dordogne in France. And so this is a Type 3, a Type 3C falchion that is long with a clipped point, but the clipped point draws out into a long point. Now, what type of hilt has he put on this beautiful falchion here? So it has a Group C pommel from the Castillon group. This is a pommel that is found on the Castillon group here. And we do find this pommel associated with other types of Italian swords, especially this type of hilt. So this type of hilt is associated with slightly later groups of swords, especially groups of swords that, because of the asymmetry here in the hilt, are associated with single-edged swords, or at least partially single-edged. So they're, rather than falchions, they're kind of like back swords. And they are especially Venetian. So you'll find them in the Doge's palace in Venice. We still have many examples of that. So the most famous example of those in the production market is called the Doge, and it's produced by Albion, and it has a hilt. Hang on a second. And it has a hilt that is similar to this one, with a single straight quillon here and a knuckle bow to it, which is not something that's often seen on medieval period swords. Now, what about this fingering here? This fingering is very interesting. So that is something that does start to show up. It's much more popular as we get closer to the 16th century, but we do see it before that. And the fact that it's on a falchion I find interesting, because the earliest appearance I'm aware of a fingering showing up in art is actually on an Italian piece of art. and it's on a falchion. It's in the 14th century. But this is something that's kind of characteristic of Mediterranean work. We see it in Iberian swords and Italian swords first. So that's where we see finger rings take off at the end of the 14th century and through the 15th century before it starts to pick up. So why do you do that? Well, most obviously you do that because you want to protect the finger. So you have the ability to have either part of a finger, or in this case with a big finger ring, you can fit all of the finger up to the second knuckle in there. And the reason that you add the finger in there is to aid in point control. So that suggests that the fencing style wants to try and get the tip of the sword into the other person's face, so that you're perhaps keeping less of the sword behind you, and you're more interested in giving a really good thrust, warding off the other opponent's sword and really stabbing it at the opponent's face. Something else that's interesting, this sword, just like the Castillon original, has a ricasso. So there is a flat area here. Now we, again, don't have many Type 3 falchions, but of the ones we have, many of them do have this flattened ricasso portion. So you can see that, again, we have fullers both on the back of the blade and on the lower part of the blade, and this part is flat. And so if you put your finger there, you're not going to slice your poor little thumb off. So very interesting components to it. Also, the back of this, not only the clip, but even another approximately 10 centimeters past the peak of the clip here is false edged. So there's a significant false edge component, as if you almost wanted to make all the cutting portion of this double-edged, even though this is very clearly designed as a quote-unquote single-edged sword. So the cross-section of this is very interesting. Rather than a just wedge cross-section that you'd find on the earlier types of falchions, you have a kind of lozenge cross-section for most of it, up until right about where the fuller terminates, in which case the back of it becomes pinched, and then you have the false edge portion, which allows you, of course, to both engage in false edge cuts as well as aiding in the thrusting. So this creates a very nice spear point, even though it's slightly offset compared to what you'd find on an arming sword. It still delivers devastating thrusts with this style of blade. Going back to the craftsmanship, so what Eric has been able to produce here is nothing less than spectacular. So obviously, this is an artisanal piece. This is a one-of-a-kind sword, and it comes with a one-of-a-kind price tag associated with it. But everything here is gorgeous. So the finish on it is beautiful. The fullering's all straight. There are little evidences of it being handmade in its construction. So I can see little itty-bitty marks along here belying the fact that he does not use any power tools in his work. He does everything here by hand. The way that the guard is put together, the way that all of these elements all come fused together, the way that the geometries all come, it's all done deliberately. The deviations from symmetry here are all consistent with what you find in the medieval period. So again, the way I like to describe it is that the artistic design has variations from symmetrical, and nothing is sloppy. Everything is done with purpose, even if it is not machine perfect and clinical in its precision, the way that some modern manufacturers have it, which again give it that handmade appearance. The grip, as is not very commonly seen on most swords, is made of rayskin, and it looks really cool with this double barred design here, holding it into position with two ferrules on each end. This gives it a lot of purchase here, and it feels very comfortable in the hand. It doesn't look like it would. Notice that the grip is not particularly long, so that as it seats in my hand just locks into place. And even if you needed to extend it, you can, because the shape of the pommel allows your hand to rest very comfortably on it. It's got a kind of pillowing effect. This almost looks like a reverse scent stopper, the way that this Castillon group pommel sits the hand. Now, the handling of the sword itself is very interesting, because these type of falchions, they tend to keep a little bit more mass in the blade than a comparable size arming sword. So as a result, even though it handles more similarly to an arming sword than probably any other family of swords, the result is that it has a tremendous amount of chopping power, but it doesn't feel quite as nimble in fencing. So if I have a similar weight, these swords are both around just short of 1,200 grams. The arming sword has less mass out in the blade. It has slightly less concentration of mass in the guard, so it's just distributed a little bit more into the pommel, and as a result, it will be able to redirect the tip a little bit more quickly and move through the wards slightly faster than the falchion. Now, the falchion isn't that slow. It is a bit more sluggish, but my goodness, once it hits, it's going to hit very, very hard. And that's just characteristic of what falchions are. A couple stats for you. We're starting off at about 4 millimeters at the shoulders, and going down to about 2 millimeters towards the tip. And right before it flares here, we've got about 2.5 millimeters right there where the fuller terminates. So it exhibits good distal taper, and that's pretty consistent with what you find on the Castillon Horde. Looks like he's put his maker's mark right about where it balances over here, so about 11 or so centimeters away from the cross guard. And as far as sharpness is concerned, let's see, I've been, again, obviously cutting in the backyard with this quite a bit, but let's see if we still have an edge. Whew. Plenty sharp. And Eric is pretty good about reinforcing the edge. So there's a very small micro bevel all the way along it. It is steady as a rock all the way down the edge. And this has shown no signs of damage throughout my use. I haven't really pushed it too terribly hard. Knocked it over, but still went all the way through everything. Ooh. Ooh. Yeah. False edge is pretty wicked too. Should have come more around. Falchiony. Oh. But it has held up quite nicely to all the testing that I've done with the sword. So this is one of, like, I really appreciate this sword. I haven't even talked about the scabbard. The scabbard is, of course, beautiful in its own right with its aged color, kind of this deep royal, almost wine colored leather. It's very simple in its design. It only has a couple of very steady marks that run along it here. It has a very simple shape that's put on. The stitching is all done very handsomely along the backside, and it sits the sword very nicely with a little slot built in here for the ring to go in and out. And again, this is one of these swords where you're obviously spending a very high in order to purchase it, you're spending a large sum of money, and you'd expect it to look nice, and it does look nice. It looks gorgeous. This is unlike any other sword that's really out there. So you're picking up a one-of-a-kind of piece, just like if you were picking up a unique painting from an artist, but it is 100% functional. You can take this, you can bring it out in the backyard, you can do everything that you'd expect a sword to do. Not only does it come from historical origins, but it is durable. It is not going to fall apart. This is not just a piece of art. This is a piece of history right there in your hands. So once again, Eric, thank you so much for letting me babysit this sword for so long. It's a shame for me to see it go, but I'm sure whoever the next owner is going to really appreciate it. And hopefully in the not too distant future, we'll be able to see some more of Eric's work on the channel. Until then, cheers guys. Take care.